The Taliban is stressing it's time for the US and its allies to pack up and get out.
Promise them, if you let me go, I will read the Quran.
In the wake of the Taliban takeover,
whether or not it turns extremism, radicalism, and terrorism.
The Taliban have taken Afghanistan.
The Taliban is in control of Afghanistan. The country's president has fled.
The general public who just want to know about what's going on in Afghanistan.
The Taliban is stressing it's time for the US and its allies to pack up and get out.
Promise them, if you let me go, I will read the Quran.
in the wake of the Taliban takeover,
Whether or not it turns extremism, radicalism, and terrorism.
The Taliban have taken Afghanistan.
The Taliban is in control of Afghanistan. The country's president has fled.
The general public who just want to know about what's going on in Afghanistan.
Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Apa khabar semua rakyat Malaysia? Kepada anda semua, terima kasih kerana memilih The Amin Leader Show pada malam ni. Ada yang tengok di handphone masing-masing, ada yang tengok di Galaxy Tab, ada yang tengok di iPhone, ada yang tengok di iPad, ada yang siap sambung HDMI dekat TV masing-masing. It's okay, no problem. Thank you very much kerana bersama pada malam ni. Dan pada anda semua yang sedang menonton, boleh tak anda tolong share anda sedang berada di mana dan clear ke tak suara saya? Alright? Sebab banyak kali juga, pernah jugalah beberapa kali sebelum ni punyalah cakap panjang, pompang, punya tak dengar suara. So kalau anda dari Kelantan, bagi tahu Kelantan clear. Kalau anda dari Tadi saya nampak Puan Hamidah dari Sibu kan. Dari Sibu clear, alhamdulillah. Ni Puan Hamidah. Puan Hamidah antara orang yang sedang bertarung di dalam proses mahkamah menentang Abu Syafiq, masya-Allah. Kita ada Asrul Sani Muhammad Shah. Waalaikumsalam brother dan Syah, masya-Allah. Jazakallahu khair brother. Kita ada Fazil Ahmad. Oh clear. Okay, Fadil, student saya. Faris K. Selangor clear. Thank you Tuan Faris. Sampurna Sabah clear. Alright. Semenyih clear. Kita ada siapa lagi? Dari Kota Baru, with love. Thank you Puan Nur Anita. Kita ada orang Kelang, masya-Allah. Orang Johor pun ada, alhamdulillah. Sadikir Sarawak, alhamdulillah. Agi Hidup Agi Gelaban. Shah Alam pun clear. Ipoh clear, alhamdulillah. Orang Ganu beres kita. Shah Alam pun ada juga, alright. Wakaf Baru Kelantan, masya-Allah pun ada. Guys, kita malam ni akan berbincang, kita akan berdiskusi, kita akan bersembang berkenaan dengan Taliban dan Afghanistan. Sesungguhnya kita kalau tengok dan menyusuri sejarah, Afghanistan adalah sebuah negara yang tidak terlepas daripada konflik dan juga perebutan kuasa sejak dulu lagi. Antaranya kalau kita tengok perang Anglo-Afghan yang pertama pada tahun 1839 hingga 1842, ketika itu Britain kalah. Dan pada Anglo-Afghan kali kedua tahun 1878 sehingga tahun 1880 Britain menang. Tetapi pada tahun 1919, kali lagi berlaku Anglo-Afghan yang kali ketiga, Britain kalah dan diingatkan disangka rupanya Afghanistan akan aman dan damai. Tetapi pada tahun 1979, Soviet Union menguasai dan menjajah bumi Afghanistan sehingga tahun 89 dan tahun 2001 sehingga baru tahun ni, tahun 2021, US menjajah Afghanistan. Dan adakah dengan penguasaan Taliban dianggap sebagai satu kemenangan untuk rakyat Afghanistan, ataupun barangkali Afghanistan adalah umpama terlepas mulut harimau termasuk mulut buaya? Malam ni kita akan bersama dengan dua orang tetamu. Seorang yang pernah menjadi tahanan Taliban 20 tahun yang lalu, iaitu Dr. Yvonne Ridley, dan juga sahabat saya Dr. Ahmad El Muhammady daripada International Center for Counter Terrorism di Hague, Netherlands, dan juga merupakan assistant professor di ISTAC. So insya-Allah kita akan bersama dengan mereka. Tapi sebelum tu saya nak say hi pada semua yang sedang join. Terima kasih kerana join live pada malam ini. Please tolong share di Facebook anda. Tolong tag kawan-kawan seramai yang mungkin agar perbincangan kita mendapat manfaat kepada ramai orang. Okay? So tanpa melengahkan masa, kita bersama dengan tetamu kita, Dr. Yvonne Ridley dan juga Dr. Ahmad El Muhammady dalam diskusi kita yang bertopik Taliban. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Yvonne, how are you?
Walaikum salam. Yes, very well. Delighted to be on your program in Malaysia.
MashaAllah. Have you ever been to Malaysia?
I have many times, and it's a wonderful, wonderful country.
MashaAllah. Please, if you come here again, give me a call. We will treat you with nasi lemak. Right. And Dr. Ahmad, apa khabar? Sihat all kita?
Alhamdulillah, very good, very good. It is a pleasure to have you, Dr. Sister Yvonne. I actually was in your talk when you were in Malaysia several years ago.
Right. Okay. Yes, I've. There've been quite a few peace conferences there in the past.
Just a simple question before we further our discussion seriously, Dr. Yvonne. What was your favorite food when you were in Malaysia, if you remember and can recall?
Wow. It was noodles with prawns. I can't remember the name, but it was absolutely delicious. And it was a street food, and it was, just out in the open air, and it was wonderful. My mouth is watering right now just thinking of it.
About the food in Malaysia. So please come back to Malaysia after the pandemic, inshallah. Right. Inshallah. So let us go into our discussion today. We were talking about the Taliban and also about Afghanistan. But let us begin with Dr. Ahmad, because in Malaysia we call it as tak kenal maka tak cinta. We will never love someone or somebody if we never know about them. Right. So Dr. Ahmad, first and foremost, we would like to know a glance history about the Taliban existence. Who are they? And are they exactly as been portrayed by the West media, 100% or maybe 50% at least, Dr. Ahmad? Usually we say the floor is yours, but I could say as a substitute, the net is yours. Please.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First and foremost, I would like to thank Amin. Amin is actually known as the Iron Man of Malaysia, for your information, Sister Yvonne.
Oh gosh, maybe I should have been told that before I agreed to come on.
Exactly, that's what he was known for. Thank you very much for inviting me to the show, and also it's an honor for me to be in the same session with Sister Yvonne. As a person who I known many years ago, but we never met in person, but very honored to see you here. And well, regarding the question, I think to me, I'm researching on the Islamic resurgent movement for so many years, and I found that Taliban's Harakat al-Taliban is one of the most interesting group that I ever study. Even though I never visited Afghanistan, but I managed to speak to many people who fought in Afghanistan. And in fact, before I came to the show this afternoon, I interviewed one Malaysian who used to fight alongside with the current defense minister of Taliban now, that is Abdul Qayyum Zakir, yeah. And he also used to fight alongside the Zabihullah Mujahid, the spokesperson of Taliban. And I managed to get a lot of very interesting information in discussion with him. But I think that, like it or not, we have to understand Taliban history by looking back into the Afghan history itself, especially the history of the country. Let me start by sharing with you a little bit about it. First is Afghanistan, known among historians as the graveyard of the empire. We have seen a lot of empire came into Afghanistan: Persian, Alexander the Great, Mongol Empire, British Empire, as mentioned just now, that is the first and third Anglo-Afghan War, 1833, 1842, and in 1919, the British came and it packed up the bag and leave. And later on, Soviet Union, 79, 89, the United States and its allied forces came in 2001. So all of them actually finally or ultimately pack up and leave. So among the Afghan, I was told that it is known that there is a phrase, they always say that you got the clock, but we got the time. I think this aptly describe the nature of the struggle in Afghanistan. And I think another thing which is very important as well is the Soviet invasion in 79, 89. And actually, before the invasion of Soviet, 78, for example, Nur Muhammad Taraki, the president of Afghanistan, captured the power, introduced reform, but to the grievances of the Afghan people, because it is again the understanding, the traditional understanding of Islam by the local people. Therefore, a lot of people, the Afghan stage, the insurrection, resistance movement came about as a result of that. And after that, and we can see that the resistance movement later on become a very large resistance movement, and many Muslim countries, Muslim people came to Afghanistan to fight alongside the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And the war finally, of course, as you know, the CIA also funding the struggle of the Afghan people and the Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and so on and so forth. And during this time as well, the Arab fighters also came. Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and you name it. Everybody from the prison in Egypt who were imprisoned in there was sent to Afghanistan to fight. When the war is over, there was a kind of civil war among themselves. And this is led to the emergence of Taliban. Taliban, during the Afghan war, they were young people who were there in Pakistan and the Afghan-Pakistani border, who study in madrasa. And then when the war is over, they saw this is the warlords and the criminals and all this controlling Afghanistan, and they got fed up with it. They say enough is enough, and we are taking over. So Mullah Omar started with the 50 students in madrasah in Maiwan in Pakistan, and growing up to 50,000 people, starting to take over Afghanistan one by one, and finally managed to capture power in 1996, and starting to impose Islamic law. And we have to understand, whenever we talk about Islamic law here, we talk about the imposition of the Hanafi school of thought. Actually, I asked this question to the person who fought alongside the Taliban leaders. I asked him, what is the mazhab and ideology of Taliban during that time? And he said to me, the mazhab of Taliban is Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Ash'ariyah, Maturidiyah. And this is the original teaching of the what they call the belief system of the Taliban. And they also believe in the traditional code of honor, for example, Pashtunwali. I believe that Dr. Yvonne experienced this. Pashtunwali is one of the things which is very, very, embedded in the Afghan culture, mainly the principle of hospitality. I think that Dr. Yvonne will explain to us after this how she was treated by the Taliban captor, so-called, the ferocious and savages people, and the principle of protection, the principle of revenge. So that is what Taliban is, and they were controlling Afghanistan since 1996 until 2001. And I would say, for the final point, and Sister Yvonne and all our listeners, that the portrayal of Taliban by the Western media is culturally biased and one-sided, and I would say it is a propaganda to some extent, because how can you judge the differences of, the uniqueness of certain culture? Afghanistan has a unique culture. As I said, they have a Pashtunwali, they have their own tradition. And even Chuck Hagel, the defense secretary of the United States, he finally admitted, he said that we have made a lot of mistakes in Afghanistan. And one of them, we don't understand their religion, we don't understand their culture. I think that's all for now.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad, for a very delightful but informative opening. And I remember I did have a talk with one of my classmates in IIU, because Dr. Yvonne, me and Dr. Ahmad, we are from the same university, which was International Islamic University Malaysia. And we have our classmates from all around the world, including one of my college mates. He was born in Afghanistan. He told me that it is their culture for them to go here and there by bringing a sniper in their hand. So having guns, going here and there, to them is a simple and normal situation. As compared to Malaysia, we will be scared to death. But now, I would like to ask you, Dr. Yvonne, this may be a cliche question where people may ask you many times, but I would like to ask again. Way back in 2001, you were detained by the Taliban. So, a very short answer, why were you detained? And does that experience immediately change your perception towards the Taliban compared before? Dr. Yvonne, please.
I was the chief reporter of the Sunday Express newspaper, and I sneaked into Afghanistan without a passport and visa. I had tried to get a visa, but it was refused 3 times. And so I decided, to hell with it, I'm going in anyway. And so I put on the all-enveloping blue burqa, which is actually called a chador, but the Western media preferred burqa in the headline. So that's what it became known as. And I sneaked in undercover. What I was wanting to do was to cut through all the propaganda, because George W. Bush, the then US president, and Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, were telling us that these Afghans, this Taliban was the most evil, brutal regime in the world, and they hated women. So I wanted to find out if it was true. I didn't expect to find out the way I did. I preferred to speak to ordinary Afghan people, and I moved around the Jalalabad area for about 2 days, talking to ordinary Afghans with my 2 guides, and to find out what life was like and if it was as bad as people had said. Because the demonization process didn't start after 9/11. It started after 1996, when the US stopped pouring money into Afghanistan and Pakistan to fund the Mujahideen who had fought the Soviet occupation. And they just thought, it's pointless supporting these people anymore. Our job is done. Mission complete. How many times have the Americans said that? And they walked away, but they also set about demonizing the ruling Taliban.
Right. And when you were released from the Taliban, 2 years later, you become a Muslim. Is it because of your promise, or you were forced to become a Muslim?
Well, as you know, in Islam, nothing is by force, and there's no compulsion in Islam. I did convert, and the trigger for my interest in Islam was brought about by my arrest and detention by the Taliban. The Taliban were delighted when I converted to Islam, and they took the credit, along with a lot of different people that I met along the way. But the experience triggered my interest in Islam, because being a captive, I was able to observe them up close and personal, and I was able to see very quickly that their faith was a way of life. It wasn't just a religion that was picked up and put down after Friday prayers. It was a way of life. It was the way they dressed, the way they spoke to one another, the way they conducted themselves. You know, if they entered a room, they would say Bismillah, and just, you know, so many different
and they
things.
give you the key, right? The key of the prison, they give it to you.
Well, yes, this amuses people greatly. They gave me the prison and said I was in charge of myself, and so I locked the cell door, and when they came for the interrogation, they would knock and ask permission to come in, and they would wait until I opened the door.
MashaAllah. That is simply rare. We will never
Yes.
find that in other countries. All right. So I just would like to make a little bit some kind of ulasan kepada rakyat Malaysia. Apa yang dikongsikan oleh Dr. Yvonne ialah kenapa dia ditahan oleh Taliban, kerana dia nak tahu sendiri sejauh manakah kebenaran orang ramai mengenai Taliban. Dan dia pergi ke Afghanistan sebagai seorang wartawan. Dia menyamar pakai tudung dan dia ditahan. Dan sewaktu dalam tahanan, antara yang menariknya ialah dia dilayan dengan baik. Bahkan dia diberi kunci untuk orang masuk ke dalam bilik tahanan dia. Itu adalah antara kelainan yang dilalui oleh Yvonne sendiri. Dan 2 tahun selepas dia dibebaskan, dia bersyahadah dengan kalimah la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Alright. So I would like to come back to Dr. Ahmad. Alright. So bila kita bincang tentang, when we talk about the Talibans, surprisingly, when we look into the media, it's almost none of the media comparing the Taliban to the previous government, which was under the US. Most of them, they love to compare the recent Taliban to the previous Taliban, where the new Taliban is called as the neo-Taliban. So my question, Dr. Ahmad, all right, is after 20 years, what was the biggest achievement by the previous government in Afghanistan? Please, Dr. Ahmad.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I think in all fairness, I mean, to be fair with the previous government of Afghanistan, after the American takeover, after the Operation Enduring Freedom in December 2001, the America and NATO, its allies, I mean, NATO forces, installed the new government of Afghanistan that is under the leadership of the interim government is Hamid Karzai.
Yeah.
Hamid Karzai was the president of Afghanistan from the beginning until 2014, I think. So he was a Sunni in the first place, and he was also a Pashtun. I think American government tried to find a more or less acceptable candidates for the president in Afghanistan so that they can actually work together with them. So Karzai was like being the president for quite some time, and he tried to actually he tried to persuade Taliban to work with them, but Taliban was opposing because they believe that that government is the proxy government and the puppet government, and it is not being actually chosen by the Afghan people. However, the Northern Alliance actually gave a full backing to this Afghan government during that time. And I would say during this Karzai time as well, secretly, Karzai making the arrangement with Taliban to allow them to return back to Kandahar. Yeah, actually, that was the people say that was the beginning of the rise of Taliban. So somewhere in 2010, I think Karzai allowed them to come back to Kandahar and regroup, because I think it is because of the tribal loyalty on the part of the Hamid Karzai, and also the threats, the security threats to him as well. Because if you do not allow our people, maybe, I mean, the Pashtun, their loyalty to the tribe is more important, I would say. And if you don't do it, there would be a revenge. There would be a protection. So Hamid Karzai, actually, to the dismay of the American government, they allowed Taliban to come back. And of course, Taliban launched war of attrition for so many years. The war of attrition is the most difficult war for any occupying forces, because you fight the enemies, you fight the elusive enemies, meaning that during the day you cannot find them. At night, that you are going to find yourself surrounded by the enemies, and suddenly they got killed in the process. And then the use of IED, improvised explosive devices, a lot. So American soldiers were killed on regular basis, including the Afghan soldiers as well. So that was the style of the Taliban, because they believe that they fought for their homeland, they fought for their religion, and they fought for their people. So they have nothing to lose. For the American people, they went there. Well, they say that we are here just to take care of other people's country. And the Afghan soldier also, they fought half-heartedly, because after all, they are fighting their own people. So sometimes they fight, sometimes they don't fight. It depends. I mean, sometimes the loyalty, the split between loyalty to the state of the government of Afghanistan and split loyalty to the tribe as well. So that was the dilemma as well. And there is another point. When Ashraf Ghani came to power, 2014, there was a report, a massive corruption happened. I think there is a report by the SIGAR. SIGAR is the special prosecutor for reconstruction of Afghanistan, who released a report. He said that there was a massive corruption, incompetence, mismanagement, and illiteracy. It was so massive among the Afghan army, as well as the people who are working with the government. And of course, in the army, for example, in the recent years, in the recent months, there was a report that this unpaid salary by the government, because the commander or the general, they pocket the money and they do not pay the salary for the soldiers. And the American soldiers reported in SIGAR report in 2021, he said that when we are about to go for an operation, the Afghan soldier was just wake up from sleep and asking for food. They don't have enough food, and they have even the shoes. substandard equipment. The weapon is jammed. They cannot fire. They cannot shoot, and the building is so bad. So that was the level of corruption that we can find in there. So when American finally felt that this war of attrition cannot go on, and if you remember in 2020, Trump said enough is enough. He made the cost benefit analysis. He said that we are not going to do this because we spent so much money, 145 billion, so over 20 years, and we achieve almost very minimal outcome. This cannot go on. So finally, he decided to make peace with Taliban and pull out. And sure enough, Taliban was quickly, and I asked actually the guy, he said, what do you think about the rise of Taliban in Afghanistan? He said that I'm not really surprised, but what I really surprised is the quickness of the Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Ya, Masya Allah. Thank you Dr. Ahmad. Apa yang nak disampaikan oleh Dr. Ahmad sekejap tadi menggambarkan bahawa di sewaktu kerajaan lama di bawah campur tangan Amerika berlaku banyak rasuah, salah guna kuasa, walaupun kerajaan Amerika telah memberikan berbilion-bilion peruntukan setiap tahun kepada Afghanistan. Dan tidak dapat dinafikan, Hamid Karzai secara senyap-senyap membuat rundingan untuk kebangkitan Taliban bagi menguasai Afghanistan. Alright, now I would like to come back to you, Dr. Yvonne, Masya Allah, because right now you are in Scotland, right?
That's right.
Masya Allah. How is it in Scotland compared to the UK?
Well, I prefer it to England. It's the Scots have been oppressed for centuries, so people up here are quite tolerant and open-minded.
MashaAllah. All right. Okay, so my question, Dr. Yvonne, way back in 2007, there was a news regarding Caitlin and Joshua Boyle. They were detained by the Taliban and become a hostage. And later on, they become one of the testimony by the West to show that there is the dark side of the Taliban. So what is interesting is that it is contrary to your experience. Your comment, Dr. Yvonne.
Well, I have actually been back to Afghanistan many times since my arrest and detention. And I have also had cause to go back to negotiate the release of some hostages in the custody of the Taliban, including Bo Bergdahl, the American soldier who was taken. And so I know the leadership. I know, we talk about this new Taliban. There are many of the original founders still there, but they have grown in wisdom and maturity. And I think that they're ready, more than ready to govern now. There have been some bad stories, but, Afghanistan is a tough place. It's a tough arena. And there are some really horrendous stories from all sides, including the Americans. Let's not forget that if Bagram could talk and reveal its secrets, I think that we would be horrified by what went on inside Bagram. So it's a tough area, it's a tough arena, even in a peacetime. So, what will unfold over the coming weeks is going to be very interesting, because the Taliban Mark II, as I call them, do have said all the right things, although a lot of people don't believe them, but they have made assurances about peace, about reconciliation, about forgiveness, and women's rights. Who on earth thought 20 years ago that the Taliban would talk about women's rights? This is something that we have difficulty getting Western governments to talk about. And here, in the 21st century, we've got the Taliban putting women's rights on the agenda and telling women newsreaders
To continue.
and being interviewed by them about this. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah, and right, regarding to Caitlin Ball, surprisingly, because there's a picture I want to show you, and I need a comment, Dr. Yvonne. This picture was taken before they were taken into hostage.
Yes.
And this picture when they were the hostage. And
yes,
as claimed by Caitlin Ball, she was tortured. All right, she was in hostile when being the hostage, but surprisingly, when she was released, she maintained wearing the tudung, wearing the hijab. At the same time, she claimed that the Taliban has been cruel to them. So it is a little bit confusing what's going on. She continued wearing the hijab.
I have a feeling that Caitlin and her husband were held by the Haqqani network, which is now part of the Taliban, or is being proposed as being part of the Taliban government. So, and of course, the Pakistan Taliban, just to confuse issues, they are not related in any way to the Afghan Taliban. A lot of things, and this is going to be the danger, a lot of things are going to be done in the name of the Taliban that will have been carried out by rogue operators. And this is one of the hardest challenges that I think the Taliban have got, because the leadership are saying one thing, and yet people will, after a war, after a transition of power, will want to pay back. And so this is going to be quite tough, because it's one thing saying, I forgive the enemy. And it's another thing when you see the person who was responsible for maybe putting you in prison, and you think, this is payback time. So this is something that the leadership are trying to instill in the Taliban foot soldiers at the moment to really behave, because the whole world is looking at them. Everybody's waiting for them to slip up or make a mistake so they can turn around and say, there is no mark to Taliban. It's exactly the same. It hasn't changed. So these are interesting. But yes, Caitlin did come out with quite a few mixed signals.
Yeah. And I just need your confession, Dr. Yvonne, because when I look at the YouTube, where all of your interviews are from Canada, you were interviewed all around the world. But surprisingly, and I'm a little bit also confused, you were never been interviewed by Fox News or even BBC or even any United States, any US TV station. Are they hiding something? Is it true?
I make them feel uncomfortable, because I put a human face on the Taliban. People forget that they are Afghans. It's something Ahmad mentioned before, about the reason that the Afghan National Army was sometimes not as enthusiastic in their work. It's because they knew that they were fighting fellow Afghans, so it made them feel uncomfortable. I put a human face on the Taliban. I am living proof that they did have a compassionate, humane side, and nobody wants to think that they've dropped bombs on nice people. So as a result, they have airbrushed me out of the discussion, which is, that's fine. We've got excellent shows like this. We've got alternative media, and we've got people around the world who want to hear the truth. And, you know, if the Taliban had ill-treated me, had slapped me around, had chopped off a limb, I would be a hero by now. I probably could have retired years ago. But because I came out and said they treated me with courtesy and respect, I've been punished every day since. You know, it's just, this is not what people want to hear. And so they try and explain it away by saying, oh, she's a victim of Stockholm syndrome. Well, to have Stockholm syndrome, you have to bond with your captors. During the entire 11 days, I was rude, aggressive, I swore at them, I spat at them, I threw things at them, I wasn't cooperative, and I went on hunger strike. So when they did release me, they held on to other Westerners, but when they released me, when I crossed over into Pakistan, I don't know who was happier, them or me, you know, because they were so glad to get rid of me. It was a real clash of cultures. I didn't understand them. They didn't understand me. And, you know, I realized that I had bought into the Bush-Blair propaganda. And I was terrified, although, you know, prisoner from hell, but inside I was terrified. And every day I would wake up, is this my last day? Is today the day they're going to kill me? Once I'd accepted, and I genuinely believed that I was going to be killed, once I'd accepted that, the next thing that I was really worried about, more so than death, was being tortured. So I just decided we better accelerate, you know, A to B and cut out the middleman. And so as I say, I was the prisoner from hell. I just wanted them to take me out and shoot me so that we could not go through, you know, the business of torture, which I thought that I would be raped and tortured. Instead, they treated me incredibly well.
Wow, mashallah. All right, what been mentioned by Dr. Yvonne is number one, kita kena bersiap sedia kerana media barat akan mencari apa jua kesilapan kerajaan baru di Afghanistan, iaitu di bawah pimpinan Taliban, untuk demonize, memburukkan lagi Taliban. Dan Dr. Yvonne juga berkongsi ketika dia di dalam tahanan, setiap hari dia dah fikir, adakah aku akan kena bunuh, adakah aku akan kena seksa, adakah aku akan kena rogol. Tetapi hakikatnya dia dilayan dengan baik setiap hari selama 11 hari di dalam tahanan Taliban. Dr. Ahmad, now let us go further. Where is it surprise to you when the Taliban are having political relations, they even have treaties and agreement with the US, with China, with Russia, with Iran, where they are considered as the enemies before, but now becoming their allies? What's your take on that?
Yeah. It shows great wisdom and maturity.
Yeah.
And sorry, that was for Ahmed, but yes.
Never mind. You can add on later on.
Well, it just shows great wisdom and maturity in the fact that, you know, forgiveness is a big part of Islam. And, you know, these men are practicing their Islam very well. They won't dilute it, they won't negotiate with it, and they won't compromise with it, but they will practice it. And forgiveness is a very major part of Islam.
Inshallah. Dr. Ahmad, what's your comment on that?
Yeah, I would agree with Dr. Yvonne about that. And I also would like to add what Dr. Yvonne mentioned about the some people, I mean, definitely there would, because the situation of the fog of war, anything can happen, and the situation was bad. And the one that I interviewed before, he said to me that he can categorize the Taliban into two classes of people. One is the educated one, the one who is really learned about Islam. And then if you look at the practice and then you look at their lifestyle, the way they talk, the way they treat guests and so on, it was so amazing. But the other class of Taliban as well, there is a ragtag people who are very illiterate and very violent. I think this is another thing that Yvonne has referred to before. And he mentioned to me one example. When he was in Kandahar, he said that he saw with his own eyes that this Taliban push the cart full with money, and whenever the time of prayer came, that guy put the money beside him by the roadside, and he prayed, and no one came and robbed the money. That was the level of security that he has seen, that he never saw anything like it happen anywhere. And during the prayer time, everybody shut down the shop and went to pray, and then after that they started to resume the business again. And I think this is the reality, or something that you cannot find in the lot of mainstream media, especially from the Western media. And actually, I also facing the same problem like Dr. Yvonne. The people accuse me as having a Stockholm children when I speak like this. It is not only you. I mean, I was speaking, I think, a couple months ago, and I was explaining to them about my experience in rehabilitation, those people who involved in militancy. And I tried to tell them their side of the story. And the other guy texted me and said, this guy may be having a Stockholm syndrome. I don't mind about that, what people want to say about it. But what I know is I know my business. Mm-hmm. And whenever you deal with the reality on the ground, you have such a level of confidence that you can speak based on the experience, not based on the reading the thing that you read in the news and in the books. You go through the process. I think that what the Dr. Yvonne experienced as well. Regarding the evolution of Taliban in terms of approach, I would say it shows the level of maturity. And even the spokesperson of Taliban, he said that we have learned so much for the past 20 years. I think Taliban make a terrible mistake as well. We have to admit, human being, he said that we are human being, we make mistake. And one of the mistake that he made was the cutting off the relationship with the outside world. And they quickly later on resume the connection, resume the external relation with other state, with Qatar, for example, and they're having communication with a lot of other parties outside Afghanistan. This has never been done before during the Taliban time in the 1996 and 2001. I think Taliban is a quick learning organization, is actually quicker than us. We are not ready to change our perception against them. But they have changed a lot since then. I think this is something to do with our perception, that whenever we've been bombarded with information and it becomes so ingrained in our mind that Taliban equivalent to evil. And this perception we cannot change. I think we have to revisit that thinking, and we try to see it based on the fact. If you remember, when Taliban came to power, 15th of August 2021, he came to the presidential palace holding an arms, full gear, entering the presidential palace.
Correct.
And they were criticized. They were criticized as the bandits entering the president. They are not civilized. Whereas in actuality, that was the culture of the Afghan people, holding the guns. They were fighting the enemy since the Alexander the Great. And later on,
and there was no looting, that we saw in Saddam's palaces. There was no looting, no paintings destroyed, nothing.
Yeah, wow,
exactly. And another thing is, a couple days later, when Taliban gave a press conference, have you seen any weapon anymore?
No more.
Yeah. So this is exactly what I mean by fast learning organization, which is quicker than us to change our perception against them. So to me, it is not really surprising, because actually there's a lot of changes taking place for the past many years among the Taliban. And as I said, they have already admitted and they are ready to change. But the question would be, are we ready to change our perception towards them? Thank you.
Wow. Apa yang disampaikan oleh Dr. Ahmad sekejap tadi ialah Taliban telah matang dalam tempoh 20 tahun dan dipersetujui oleh Dr. Yvonne. 20 tahun mereka berguru antaranya dengan Qatar bagaimana untuk meningkatkan pemahaman mereka di dalam sebuah political governance. Dan menariknya Dr. Ahmad kata mereka adalah sebuah kerajaan yang cepat belajar, sebuah organisasi yang cepat belajar. Soalnya, adakah kita cepat belajar untuk mengubah persepsi kita terhadap Taliban? Wallahu alam, yang tu kita akan fikir-fikirkan, sebab tu kita buat diskusi pada hari ini. Dan I would like to come back once again to Dr. Yvonne, because when I go through your experience in life, especially before you were a Muslim and even after you are Muslim, because even before you were Muslim, you are vocal in this Palestine issue, for example. And when you are a Muslim, you are vocal in talking about Islamophobia, about feminism, women in Islam, and even Islamic current issues. What is your motivation and what is your end of mind, your goal in doing this, Dr. Yvonne?
You know, my childhood, I come from a working class background. And it was very heavy industry, steel making, coal mining, and shipbuilding. And women really didn't have a place in this society other than as somebody who would cook and clean and produce children, which was not for me. So I, railed against my environment from a very early age, and I began to use my voice and write and discover that the pen is mightier than the sword. So I've got my immediate area that I'm trying to change for the better for women's rights. And then this day somebody asked me to sign a petition. And I said, what's it for? And they said, it's for Palestine. I went, oh, those crazy people, they're hijacking airliners and a cruise liner, and, they're doing terrible things there. Why would I support terrorists? And I was, well, do you know the story of Palestine? I said, no, tell me. And they told me, and it's like anybody hearing this story for the first time, you keep saying, but hang on. So they had their land stolen and they weren't allowed to fight back, and they weren't, and you just think this is insane. And so I became very involved in the Palestinian issue. I signed the petition. And after that, I started looking into terrorism and what motivates people. Because at that point, we had what is often referred to as the Irish Troubles, which was basically, it was a civil war in Britain. But they, tried to sideline it and airbrush it out of the British system. But the fight of the IRA against the British state was something else. So I started looking into that, and I was raised as Protestant, but I began to think, the Catholics have a point, and why is nobody looking at their side of the story? And then, of course, the whole propaganda and the media comes into it. And so that is basically where I'm coming from, that I developed an ability, I think, to empathize and to try and walk in other people's shoes and try and see things from their point of view. And this sense of injustice, I began to feel quite sharply. And I think that by the time I started reading the Quran, That is the big trigger for me, is the sense of equality and justice. Because as a practicing Christian, you know, you're told to love your neighbor, do good deeds, be given charity and smile, and it's so easy to be nice and do nice things. That's the easiest thing in the world. But with Islam, delivering justice not just to your family and friends, but to the enemy as well in equal measure, that's a real test.
Yeah.
And this sense of justice really impressed me, and that is what resonated with me regarding Islam. So I felt I didn't make a great leap of faith. I'm still praying to the same God. I'm just doing it a different method. So I think that you know, like the Taliban, maybe I've matured and got some wisdom as well, and I see the power of words and the power of the media, and how easy it is to flip people's opinions and alter their perceptions. And the Taliban have been demonized beyond recognition to such a point that the media doesn't know how to roll back now.
Allahu Akbar. All right. Dr. Ahmad, I have a very critical question, because those who are supporting the Taliban, they're saying that the Taliban are fighting against the US in order to get back their land. But at the same time, there's a fact saying that the Taliban has been secretly making an agreement, discussing with the US, so that the US get out from Afghanistan, so that as a result, the Taliban can take over in power. At the same time, they are fighting among themselves, which is the Northern Alliance, or should I say the anti-Taliban resistance. What's your comment on that? Dr. Ahmad, you can unmute your mic.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, everybody knows that for the past 20 years, Taliban has been fighting the NATO forces, especially the United States. And of course, United States has been, conducted targeted assassination against Taliban's leaders, including Al-Qaeda. You name it, a lot of people being targeted by the drone, for example, Hakimullah Mahsoud, and this is Khalid al-Husaynan, and who else? A lot of other peoples in Yemen included, being targeted by the drone attack. And the fight was very intense. So they are fighting each other for a very long time. And there is, meaning that if we look at on the surface, it is impossible for them to be friends. However, at the end of the day, in the war of attrition, you have to acknowledge that when you have an effective power on the ground, in the case of Taliban, they have an effective power in Afghanistan, in the most part of Afghanistan, you have to negotiate with them. You know, in Israel, they have no choice. They have to negotiate with Hamas as well, because that was an effective power on the ground, de facto power. You cannot negotiate with somebody else. And that peace agreement, actually, it is not coming out just recently. It has been in the process for quite some times. I believe that it was being hatched maybe during the Obama's time. I mean, the plan to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan has been like in place for a few years, because United States cannot stay in there. I mean, what is the point? Finally, they would question, what is the point of you spending 100 billion of money and with the little outcome? So they have to make an agreement, and this agreement, actually, it is not done in secret. It is done in the open. That's why we have a lot of, news coming out in 2000, in the year 2000, February 29. That was the agreement for bringing peace to Afghanistan between, I mean, I'm reading the agreement now between the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state, and it is known as Taliban, and the United States of America. Actually, America still do not recognize Taliban. I believe that Taliban would change its name anytime soon, because the name Taliban or Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is not being recognized by the United States and maybe the world. Right. So the agreement is not done in secret, and it is done in the open. And Taliban also admitted that they make a commitment. Right. You can withdraw your troops. Let me take over. But I promise one thing: no one is going to use Afghan soil to fight against the United States, and we'll make sure that. And we have to remember, Taliban is a kind of people who really stick to its promise when it's make the commitment. Is a part of a Pashtun Wali. They will deliver what they said. So that's the Afghan people. That's the code of life. That is the code of honor for them, actually, to make sure that the promise is delivered. So right now we have seen that Taliban make this commitment, and they say that, okay, we will make sure that we will never allow any forces to harm the foreign powers in Afghanistan or anywhere in the world. Right. Now we have the problem. One is ISIS group growing inside Afghanistan. Yeah. And that's why you say that there is the Taliban has to fight the enemies from within. I think that is the challenge for the Afghan people. Actually, I would like to mention 4 biggest challenge for the Taliban to face now. One of them is to secure, to establish security in Afghanistan. This is the most difficult part, because they have to fight the Northern Alliance. Northern Alliance controls a very small part of the Panjar area, and it is controlled by the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud. I think Yvonne maybe can explain to us about it. So he's not an effective power in Afghanistan, because he's a small band of army who not satisfied with the Pashtun, with Taliban, and they start fighting them. And so Taliban has to take care of that problem. He actually even try to negotiate with the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud. And not only that, he has to make sure that Taliban is not growing inside, ISIS is not growing inside. I think ISIS has actually started, the Taliban is facing the serious problem right now, because ISIS is starting making problem by conducting the suicide attack recently. That is the first challenge. The second challenge is to prove its credential. Taliban we need to give time to Taliban to prove that he has actually changed. He has a changed organization. And so I agree with Nick Carter, the British Chief Army, who say that we need to give Taliban time to prove its credential. I think that it is a good way forward. And number 3 is to restore its image. Taliban has a challenge to rehabilitate, I would say, its image associating with violence, and also with what they call bandits and so on.
Irony.
Yeah, exactly. At least that is the success of the propaganda and agenda setting media, that they have to restore this image. And I think that they have done so well right now, because they have a spokesperson who engage with media on regular basis. I think that is the starting point. And the fourth one is to rebuild the country. And I think this is where the role of Muslim country is very important. I believe that OIC should play the role. I think this is the moment, the best opportunity for OIC to play its role in the context of helping the Afghan people, because it is now Afghan is being ruled by the Afghan themselves, not somebody else. And Malaysia, especially, one thing that the person that I interviewed said to me, Malaysia should send journalists in there in order to get the accurate news from Afghanistan, not to rely on the other source of information. We should put one media person, maybe Astro Awani, or maybe a TV Hijrah. We should send our people in there to get the news from Taliban itself, instead of relying on other people's sources. So only then we can get the accurate information. And I think the government of Malaysia as well should offer helps in whatever means possible. Thank you, Min.
MashaAllah. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. I forgot to recap what been mentioned and explained by Dr. Yvonne. Dr. Yvonne ni, untuk makluman para penonton semua, dia sebelum memeluk Islam pun sudah pun vokal dalam perjuangan membela rakyat Palestin. Dahulunya dia anggap perjuangan di Palestin adalah satu keganasan, adalah satu kezaliman, tapi dia melihat rupa-rupanya apalah salahnya nak mempertahankan tanah sendiri. Dan pada sebelum dia masuk Islam, memang dia support Palestin, dan bila dia masuk Islam, dia baca Quran, dia melihat rupa-rupanya apa yang dia percaya selama ni memang betul, dan dia mengukuhkan lagi kepercayaan dia untuk menegakkan keadilan dan menentang kezaliman. Dan Dr. Ahmad juga berkongsi dengan kita, Afghanistan khususnya di bawah pimpinan Taliban, dia berhadapan dengan cabaran, antaranya ialah ISIS yang mungkin akan membuatkan nama Taliban, dan ada 4 cabaran yang disebutkan oleh Dr. Ahmad, insyaAllah saya akan kongsikan dalam YouTube nanti, yang antaranya ialah nak membuktikan kepada dunia imej Taliban tidak lagi dicala dengan imej teroris. Okay, Dr. Yvonne, last but not least, do you think there is a brighter future for the people in Afghanistan under the leadership of Taliban? Because some people, they are worried because when they look into a video where lots of the people of Afghanistan clinging to a plane to get out from Afghanistan. Your comment, Dr. Yvonne?
Well, they were indeed harrowing scenes, but Dr. Ahmad is right. The security has got to be sorted first. The ISIS Khorasan, Daesh problem has to be dealt with, and I think they will deal with it speedily and efficiently. And to, you know, they've been quite brilliant so far in their dealing with the media, and they've been incredibly patient while they've been asked some crazy questions from very aggressive media. But Zabihullah Mujahid, who I finally got to see him, I've spoken to him on the phone a few times. Now I know what he looks like.
Can you forward me his number later on?
Yes, he has handled the very aggressive, hostile media with calm and dignity, and so has Sahel Shaheen. So what I would say to them is, please keep to your word, and generally they do. You know, whenever an act of well, the Americans call it terrorism, has been carried out, the Taliban will say, yes, we did that, and they're quite unapologetic about it. They do, they don't lie. So I'm greatly encouraged by their words so far, but there are people out there who will try and destabilize that. People who don't want to see a peaceful Afghanistan. But the fact that the Taliban have been reaching out to the Hazara community is encouraging. The 80% of them are Shia. They've reached out to Iran, which is great. Of course, that is causing great angst with Israel, that's fighting a shadow war with Iran at the moment in the Persian Gulf, and Israel's new best friends in Saudi. You know, they're not at all happy at this reaching out to Iran. But the whole area, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, what a great trading bloc that is. Throw in Russia and China, and the whole region could do really well. So you have to think, who wouldn't be happy at that? Well, I've mentioned the Saudis, Israel. You've also got India. India is constantly having a war of words with Pakistan over occupied Kashmir. And they don't want to see a stable Afghanistan, because if there's a stable border with Pakistan, then the military in Pakistan can forget all about that part and focus all their attention on the Indian border, which is not what India wants. So there's lots of potential there to destabilize the region. And I just hope that isn't allowed to happen. I think the Taliban are savvy enough to realize, and I think that I'm quite confident they're going to dispense with ISIS Khorasan very, very quickly. You know, some elements of the Western media can't tell the difference between the Taliban and Daesh, and
they don't know.
And it's so frustrating. But the Taliban are quite puritanical and very conservative with a small c. And this business of sex slaves and selling women and trafficking and dealing, it disgusts the Taliban. You know, they just don't want to see or hear about that. And the treatment of the Yazidi women in Iraq really caused great distress among the Taliban circles, because this was anathema to them. This is not Islam. But what I would say to the Taliban is, the whole world is looking at you now.
Yeah.
You can show the true beauty of Islam in terms of forgiveness, in terms of reconciliation, in terms of peace and tolerance. So please, you know, everybody's looking, and this business of Sharia law, people are, you know, oh my goodness, it's Sharia law. Tens of thousands of Westerners are living under Sharia law in Saudi, in they go on holiday to the UAE.
No problem.
And they have no problems at all, because if you stay within the confines of the laws of a particular country, you're not going to encounter any problems. So this whole business of Sharia law is also, the media really needs, the Western media in particular, really needs to sit down and be re-educated, because culturally, they are so far away from any understanding. We've heard the mention of the code of honor of the Taliban, this Pashtun Wali, but it just goes over their head. And I know this because that was me 20 years ago. You know, in my Western arrogance and Western ignorance, I thought that I knew what was right and that these people are primitive and they don't understand, when in fact it was me that was wrong. So a lesson for the media.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to...
Yeah, please, Dr. Ahmad. Your last word, Dr. Ahmad.
Yeah, I would like to add 3 points, and Dr. Yvonne. I want to comment on the plane. Those people who are leaving Afghanistan, definitely some of them very scared of Taliban and is trying to seek political refuge, political asylum in another country. But actually, many of them also is the economic refugee, those people who are trying to seek living overseas and living in the foreign countries and to have a good life in there, because in Afghanistan, the life was very, very tough. So this is the best opportunity for those people who want to leave. I mean, you can just get on the plane without visas, without passport, and you can get a very wonderful life outside. So that is the first point. And the second point is Taliban should not repeat the ISIS mistake. With all this violence, with all these things, they should be very disciplined, and I believe they are able to do it. And my last point is I would like to call all of us, all listeners here, viewers here tonight, be a truth seeker. And I think we have the best example. We have the best example with us here tonight. That is Dr. Yvonne Ridley. She was there in Afghanistan for seeking for the truth, and she found it. Why she found it? Because that was the promise of God. God says Hidayah is conditional upon your behavior. Inna Allah la yahdil qawma zalimin. God will never give guidance for those people who are unjust. If you are unjust, if you're honest, if you're sincere, the light of guidance will come to you. And I think we have the best example in the front of us, And I would like to call all of us to be a truth seeker. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Dr. Yvonne, your last word to all us Malaysian who have the opportunity to have you tonight. Please, your simple words.
Well, just if called upon, give as much support as you can to our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. They need to feel the ummah, or the concept of the ummah around them at the moment, that they're not going to be abandoned again. And I, just would just love to see the sleeping giant that is Afghanistan rise up again and be a major part of the Muslim world.
Inshallah. And one thing for sure, Dr. Yvonne, even though the BBC never invited you or any American TV station never invited you, we Malaysia are with you. No problem. Don't worry. All right.
Indeed.
Thank you.
MashaAllah. All right. Before we end up our discussion, at least we have achieved several things that we agreed upon. Number one, be a truth seeker. Jangan beriman dengan media barat semata-mata. Number two, we urge the Malaysian media to send their own reporter, their own journalist to get a first-hand information so that we can report to the world accordingly. And number three, yes, we may not judge. It is too early to judge the Taliban right now, but they are doing a good start. And inshallah, let's pray for the best for the Muslim all around the world. Dr. Ahmad El Muhammady and also Dr. Yvonne Ridley, thank you very much for being in the Amnidi show tonight. So inshallah, we hope that we can meet again, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, we can see you again, Ami. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And to all viewers, pada semua penonton, terima kasih kerana bersama kita pada malam ini. InsyaAllah kita jumpa lagi. Saya Amin Idris. See you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.